Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 598 through 600, which will cover manga chapters 672 through 674. And yeah, we've now gotten into the 600s, which is crazy and means we're probably about halfway to catching up to where the anime is right now. But yeah, Caesar is beginning to make some moves, and all our heroes right now are in some kind of trouble. And also, just as a reminder, as always, this will be my last episode of the year, and like usual, I will take the last couple weeks of the year off, but I will be back after the new year with some new episodes as well, so look forward to that. So, synopsis, things keep going from bad to worse for our various Straw Hat groupings. The plan to take down Caesar is off to a very bad start, with Luffy and Smoker and Law being taken down and captured, while Law is also stopped by this mysterious man named Virgo. Caesar, after making short work of Luffy, turns his sights to taking the children back from Nami and Usopp, while Sanji's group struggles to find Kinemon's torso while being attacked by Smiley. Alright, so differences. So in the manga, when Sanji is diving into the water to look for Kinemon's torso, he doesn't use observation haki in the manga, and pretty much right at the same moment that the shark with the torso in its mouth swims by, he just sees it right there. So he doesn't even get an opportunity to use observation haki in the manga. But the anime decides to stretch this out and have him look for a little longer while using observation haki. Another scene that was changed was the scene with Yarisugi has a few scenes added and or changed. First off, the moment where he buys apples is an anime filler. Also, when the townspeople recollect how good of a person Virgo is, they actually recollect an image of Virgo with french fries stuck to his face. This is omitted in the anime as well. While in the manga, you don't explicitly see this happening, but Yarisugi, it's highly implied that he kicks that guy's face, because in the next panel you see him bleeding and he's got blood coming out of his nose after being kicked. This is completely omitted from the anime as well, probably because of violence, I don't know, censorship maybe. And then lastly, when everyone is locked up in the cage, the joke where Luffy doesn't remember who Doflamingo is, or the added bit where Tashigi mentions that he later attacked Moria at the Summit War, was filler for the anime. But honestly, I love that they added this joke in, because it is pretty funny when Luffy can't remember who Doflamingo is. With that, though, that's pretty much all for the differences, so let's get into the episode. So picking up on the first of the cliffhangers from the last set of episodes, we pick up the last thread of Law being cornered by Monet and this mystery person. This person's name is Virgo, and he and Law seem to have a long history, as based on what Virgo is saying, it seems to imply that he's known Law since he was very young. Despite his very stern and intimidating aura, the first thing you can't help but notice is the half-eaten hamburger patty that's stuck to his cheek. Later we find out that Virgo is quite a foodie, but he's a very messy eater. But that doesn't even begin to describe it. Later we'll see just how bad he is, as in almost every appearance he's got something random stuck to his cheeks, which contrasts so heavily with his incredibly stoic and threatening nature. We don't know much about him here, as even in the manga, Virgo's title card just shows Mystery Man. But in a later scene in the next episode, we find out that he is a Marine Vice Admiral and the head of the G5 Marine base. And it's here we begin to understand who the mole was that was helping Caesar cover everything up so that he can run his lab here. What's crazy is that we also get an answer as to why Law just can't go in and wreck things himself against Caesar, and that's because it's revealed that in order to form a disagreement with Caesar, he put up his own heart in exchange for Monet's heart as collateral, which Virgo has right now, and anytime he damages it, it of course causes immense amount of pain to Law. One other thing to note about Virgo is his voice actor has one of the most smoothest voices working in anime today, with probably only Kenjiro Tsuji surpassing him. Virgo is played by Junichi Suabe. Some of his more famous roles, especially today, are Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, Kyogai, the Taiko demon that Tanjiro defeats in Season 1 of Demon Slayer, also Aizawa, or aka Eraserhead from My Hero Academia. But I also know him as Seng from Final Fantasy VII, the leader of the Turks, and also Keigo Atobe from Prince of Tennis, which is one of my personal favorite characters that he plays. He's in plenty of other famous series as well, like Black Clover, Shokugeki no Soma, and even various Gundam series. just to name a few, although I haven't seen very many of those, so I can't really speak to his roles in there. But along with Virgo, Suabe will actually return much later down the line in One Piece to take over another very significant role that I won't reveal for spoilers. Back in the center of the island, Zoro's group is waiting for Sanji to retrieve Kinemon's torso from the bottom of the lake, but they're increasingly surrounded by the smiley slime monsters. And I thoroughly enjoyed this exchange between Zoro and Brook here, as they try to deal with the slimes but are unsuccessful, as each time either of them cut into the slime, they just fuse back together while also producing poisonous gas. Surprisingly though, while the sleeping gas from the Yeti Cool brothers affected Brook, he seems to be fine with poison gas for some reason. So I guess the logic is that he can be put to sleep, but he can't actually be killed by any other means unless you destroy his bones. My favorite part is where Zoro screams at Brook saying, "I just tried that, can't you learn from observation?" And Brook's response is, "I thought maybe you got unlucky." And that's such a Brook response too. Then Kinemon starts to writhe in pain as it's shown from Sanji's perspective that it's being chewed on by a shark, which quite frankly is amazing how he's even alright after that. This is either anime logic or Kinemon is actually a lot stronger than we thought, or at the very least, fairly tough to withstand being chewed on by a shark. Sanji does make it out and deliver the remaining piece to Kinemon, and I really like this scene because while Kinemon has been kind of a dick to them, and Sanji in particular now, and now that they have proven to him that he has misjudged them gravely up till now, and he gets on his hands and knees and bows with his head touching the ground, which is a practice called dogeza in Japanese culture, and this basically means the utmost apology and plea for forgiveness. Now, if we're going off of like historical context, like typically you don't see samurai who were seen as one of the upper class citizens in feudal Japan do this kind of behavior unless they committed a very serious act. This makes Sanji kind of uncomfortable to be shown this much reverence because he wants to kick this guy's ass due to how annoying he was up till now. And it makes it hard for him now to do so because of just how much regret that he's showing, which I really appreciate these types of scenes because it really shows you what type of character both these guys are. Unfortunately, they're completely surrounded by the smileys, and I crack up when the camera pans to Zoro and Brook, just nonchalantly telling Sanji there was nothing they could do while both of them are picking their noses. But Kinemon reveals he has the ability to use a burning blade, basically opposite to Brook, which can produce and cut through fire, which is crazy cool and shows that the samurai of Wano are no joke. This of course intrigues Zoro and offers to help Kinemon look for his son Momonosuke, with Brook also curious about the samurai, no doubt after having to deal with Ryuma all that time on Thriller Bark, and him also being a swordsman himself, it intrigues him. And with that, Sanji has no choice but to tag along and make sure Zoro doesn't get lost. One thing to note about this particular scene is that in the manga, in an info box, we actually get to learn what Smiley actually is. And what it is it's a poison slime with a zone-type devil fruit incorporated into it. Specifically, the Sarasara no Mi model Axolotl. And the Sarasara part is short for salamander. And so he's basically a salamander or an axolotl. And this is never mentioned or explained in the anime at any point as far as I remember. And correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I don't remember this ever being mentioned in the anime. The only mention of this in the anime is that they leave the line in where Zoro says that thing kind of resembles a salamander. And to which Zoro was actually correct. But yeah, it never actually gives you that info box, nor is it ever explicitly stated by any of the characters in the series. So yeah, this is a piece of information you would only know had you read the manga, or obviously if you went on the internet. In the next episode, 599, we cut to an unnamed island in the New World where we see some more of the G5 Marine soldiers and get even more context for what is going on with Virgo and the G5 base, as well as the kidnapped children. This island is where all those kids that were being experimented on were taken from 3 years ago, it seems. But the parents still can't believe that the fake report that they were all perished in an accident and ask them to look once more. And I really like that they ask for Tashigi by name, as she has established herself as one of the more empathetic Marine officers, and are convinced that if they could ask her, she'd help. And you know what? They'd be right. Tashigi is easily one of the more kinder and just Marines, as we all know and love. Unfortunately, we now are starting to get the picture that Virgo is the one that orchestrated the kidnappings for Caesar, and these G5 Marines seem to follow Virgo more than Smoker and Tashigi. It's pretty heartbreaking to see these parents all desperately clinging to the hope that their child is still alive, but it's even more heartbreaking since we know that they are alive, but in incredible pain right now. Now, before we move back to the kids and Punk Hazard, one translator's note. So Commodore Yarisugi and his name, which is a wordplay gag, needs to kind of be explained. They try to do this in the subtitles, at least in the Crunchyroll subtitles. I don't know how they actually get this across in the manga, but in the Crunchyroll subtitles, they do add the parentheses of like going too far. So Yarisugi in Japanese means to go too far or to overdo it. So that's why everything he says is taken to an extreme, like asking for 1,000 apples or that they searched for the kids over 1,000 times. It's something about him that makes him want to basically take everything to an extreme, and what he does is yarisugi or overdone. Now back at the lab, Luffy, Robin, Frankie, Law, Tashigi, and Smoker have all been captured and locked up in sea stone chains, and this is where Virgo makes himself known to Smoker and Tashigi to their shock and anger. But it's ridiculous having this insanely intimidating villain character have this absurd trait of leaving food stuck to his face. Monet pointing that out to him as if it were like a crumb or a smudge on his face when it's like 2/3 of an entire hamburger patty, while Virgo acts like it's unnoticeable. It's just hilarious to me. The way he obliviously responds to Monet, "How did you know that?" when it's so freaking obvious. But easily my favorite part about this entire scene is how Robin and Luffy reminisce nostalgically about the situation they're in, because it reminds Robin of how many of the same faces were in a cage all the way back in Arabasta, and Luffy jovially agreeing, "That's right, Kemurin and we were all captured by you." And it just reminds you how much things have changed, and yet things haven't changed. I absolutely love this almost meta joke poking fun at the similarities of the situation, while Smoker's just as annoyed at how unserious they are despite the grave situation they're all in yet again. And this scene is just chef's kiss in my opinion. I don't know why, but I really love this sort of recall of that specific moment of them all being captured. And the cage is similar too. It's like this square cage that they're all just kind of like grouped together in. Of course, for Smoker and Tashigi, I can certainly understand why they'd be pissed off at this moment, just learning the worst case scenario has happened, that the mole in the G5 Marines was the head of the base, and is now just going to sit idly by and leave his men to die to whatever Caesar has planned for them. Law then adds his own insight into this as we're made aware that they have some sort of connection. He lets them know that Virgo was never really a Marine and that he was originally a pirate serving under this underworld broker named Joker, and infiltrated the Marines so that he could carry out tasks for this Joker. And in a shocking reveal, Law tells us the true identity of this Joker as the Shichibukai Don Quixote do Flamingo, to which Luffy, always knowing how to cut the tension, as the dark and ominous music swells, it cuts to silence and Luffy concentrates really hard and suddenly says, "Da-da-da," or "Who's that?" And this was so funny. I don't know. I'm glad that they added this in the anime because it's such a funny line and it's so Luffy. Now, this was certainly a surprise, but I kind of had a small inkling it might be him just because of all the clues we had gotten so far about how Doflamingo has his hands in so many underworld dealings like the human auction shop in Sabori. I won't go as far as to say I called it, but I definitely had him on my short list as someone who could potentially be Joker. It's just unfortunate for anime-only watchers, this reveal is somewhat spoiled in the opening with Doflamingo's appearance in it. It doesn't flat out say it, but the fact that he's there kind of leads you to think it's him. If things couldn't get any worse, back at the lab with Nami and Usopp, the kids have become violent as the sleep powder's effects have begun to wear off, but the worst part of all this is that Caesar himself has appeared to collect the kids back himself. And this is really bad, as Usopp and Nami do not stand a chance against him, especially not when Luffy didn't stand a chance at this point. But the most disturbing part of this entire section is just how addicted to the drug the kids are. Seeing just how desperate they are to get the candy and be relieved of the pain while Nami is trying her best to save them without harming them. And again, I have to applaud Akemi Okumura's voice acting here because the amount of desperation and anger in her voice is palpable, especially when she's trying to stop Usopp from harming the kids, which at this point, I don't even know Usopp could stop them even if he wanted to, especially the larger kids being able to rip apart their chains and lift massive, silo pipes over their heads like it's nothing. This part always gives me chills for all the bad reasons, as it's hard seeing the kids become increasingly belligerent and desperate to the point where they begin to even hallucinate, and it's really harrowing to see. In this scene, we learn a bit more about how Caesar's powers work, as well as it seems to pretty evident that he needs to be in close proximity to manipulate somebody's breathable oxygen, as now it's a pretty clear pattern. He always moves in behind the person he wants to choke out. And so this might give us a clue as to like how he will eventually be defeated, because obviously Luffy can attack from range. He just needs to make sure that Caesar does not sneak up on him now that he knows that he can do it. He can also extinguish any fires by removing the oxygen around Usopp's Firebird star, which is an attack we haven't actually seen since that iconic moment he shot the world government flag to declare war on them in the famous "I want to live" moment. With Nami and Usopp on the ground suffocating, Caesar orders the kids to finish them in a very sadistic and twisted turn of events, but just when you think there's no one around to save them, a really big surprise shows up, and this I was not expecting. I was half expecting that maybe Sanji and the others would happen upon them and step in to save them, but instead it's freaking Brownbeard. This guy is one tough cookie. Like, he's still alive and has now switched sides, protecting Nami and Usopp, and more so out of anger for Caesar and leaving him for dead, as well as concern for his crew, which we'll talk about later. And I do like that Brownbeard has dimensions to him. He is, after all, a former pirate captain of his own crew, and even though he was one of the bad pirates before even joining Caesar, he still cares for his crew and wants to ensure the safety and freedom of his men. And the fact that Oda took the time to give this weird random pirate his own motivations and character arc is also so impressive to me, as always. I mean, you actually start to care for Brownbeard a little and hope that he does get his crew back. But even with that determination and drive, he is still taken down easily by Caesar's Gastonette attack, as well as we are led to believe that Nami and Usopp was also attacked. But obviously, none of us believe that any of these three characters are dead or gone in any way. And we even see that later on when we see their sort of lifeless bodies kind of on the ground. But, they're still alive. To wrap this set of episodes up, we get one final scene where Caesar is preparing an experiment with the new gas weapon of mass destruction that he's getting ready to demonstrate to a bunch of potential buyers. And a few of the folks that seem to be watching are people we are all familiar with, such as Pecoms and Baron Tamago from the Big Mom Pirates, as well as the three supernovas, Basil Hawkins, Eustace Kid, and his first mate Killer. The only ones I don't think we've ever met or know who they are the first pair of people with the guy smoking the cigar. I don't recognize him, and I don't think we ever get to know who he is. So I think this is just a random guy to kind of fill out the fact that Caesar is trying to sell to a multitude of different buyers. And I will admit, this is the part of Punk Hazard that kind of loses its pacing a bit and begins to really slow, because it seems like so many of the storylines have just kind of like gotten to a standstill for several episodes without much progress. I mean, like we've talked about in this episode, like there is a lot of things happening, but it doesn't seem like anything's really progressing, especially these three episodes. It seems like everyone's still captured, nothing has happened, and we're still kind of in the same place, but with maybe a little bit more added context and information. I think the most significant thing that's happened is the fact that Kinemon got his torso back. That's really the only real progress that's actually the story has made, I feel like. And so, yeah, this is where I feel like a lot of people feel like Punk Hazard really starts to get a little boring or not as interesting. And it is a little flawed in that way. And I certainly agree with that sentiment. But the thing is like, it's not that bad because it's not that long. I guess when you're watching week to week in an anime, it does get pretty bad. Like, the manga is certainly not nearly as bad with this pacing. But the story does pick up in a little bit. And once Punk Hazard gets into its third act, it does get really fun again. And I think the third act is really what sells Punk Hazard for me. Well, the first act, too, is pretty funny. But the third act is also really action-packed, very, kinetic, and really action heavy. And so it's really fun to watch the third act of Punk Hazard. But you kind of have to wade through the sort of lackluster second act of Punk Hazard, unfortunately. But yeah, despite things having gotten worse for our heroes, it looks like things are about to get even worse as Caesar is getting ready to launch another island-wide attack, one even more devastating than the one that originally wiped out Punk Hazard all those years ago. So we'll have to see how everyone survives, especially Nami, Usopp, and Brownbeard, who are currently just completely incapacitated and knocked out, as well as Zoro's group, who's still currently running outside. And so we'll see how they all get away from this supposed island-wide attack. But anyways, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Also, for next year, I have kind of made it my goal to try and get to 500 overall subscribers. And so, yeah, hopefully you guys can all help me out. And I really appreciate all your support from all this time. And yeah, just kind of set a small goal for myself for next year. But check my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast for updates of when I post new episodes, as well as see some pictures of my manga collection, as well as my One Piece card game collection. But yeah, I'll be going on a couple-week break. But as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. Stay safe out there, have a happy holidays, and I hope to see you next year on the next episode. Bye!